kicking it off. Welcome to She Media South by Southwest, Future of Health collab. I would make you do the wave, but we need more people, and we're going to get that at the end. All right. You guys, I don't want to overwhelm you. Not my pun.
She's going to be doing this the whole
but
session.
I am. But I am up here with two of the best, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They are brains, they are brawn. They're going to literally blow your mind and your ovaries out of the water with the knowledge they're about to drop. So, Dr. Shepard, let's start with you.
Well, the good thing is if you do blow your ovaries out right now, I can put them back in for you, so we're good. You're in good hands. But no, I'm Dr. Jessica Shepard. I live here in Texas. Any Texans here?
Woo!
All right. I'm in Dallas, and I am the CEO of my practice, Sanctum Med and Wellness, where we really look at holistic health differently than just Western medicine. We really infuse Eastern philosophy. And then also Chief Medical Officer for Very Well Health. We're based out of New York City, and we are content based on everything health, and we have Very Well Mind, Very Well Fit, Very Well Family.
Excellent. Tell me one thing you've learned surprising about ovaries in your career.
That they're very cute. So I do a lot of surgery. I'm a minimally invasive gynecologist, and they are just so cute. And I think they get a bad rap. I think sometimes when we think something is wrong in the pelvis, we're like, those ovaries. And I'm like, but they're so cute. But I do think that they're very powerful, and I tell all my patients that they are the power of your pelvis. They really are.
You had me at minimally invasive. Dr. Beim, you ready? Tell us who you are, what you do, and then something surprising you've learned about ovaries in your career.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Dr. Piraye Beim. I am originally from Turkey, but I grew up in Texas, so I raised my hand when you asked. I live in New York City right now, and I have been a scientist researching women's health for a little over 20 years. I'm the founder and CEO of a women's health-focused biotech, meaning we're developing new drugs for women's health based in New York City.
All right, what's a surprising fact you can tell us about ovaries that you've learned?
Well, I've learned that they're not just an egg factory. So it turns out the ovaries are really central command of a woman's health and her vitality, and it'll be fun to discuss it a bit more today.
All right. Okay, so that's where we're going to start. Who knows what ovaries are? Raise your hand. Ish? I heard an ish. All right, Dr. Shepard, start us off.
Yeah.
What do ovaries do? What's their function?
And just like Pariah was saying, ovaries really, I think people think that they're like only one thing that they do, but they really do add vitality. They help with sex drive, always a fan of sex drive. And they really are helping restore who we are metabolically, reproductively. And I really want women to understand just how impactful they are, because I think that they have been shunned from research. I think that they have been shunned from what we think of them and how we find importance and value to them. And the more that we find a voice individually as women to collectively bring our pelvis and reproductive health to the forefront, then we're going to get somewhere with innovative technology, medications, really just a way to beautify the ovary than it's being vilified.
Okay, so you said it's been shunned by research. Dr. Beim, do you want to kick that off and then tell us what else, besides not just an egg-making factory, do ovaries do?
Sure.
So tell us how it's shunned first.
Ooh. So I think words matter. And if you think about the word testes, so the word testes comes from the root testify, testament. It's the truth or the vitality. So for years, we've recognized that the testes are a really critical organ for male function and vitality. Our equivalent organ is called the ovary, which means home of the egg. So I think we already, so many of the words that we use, menopause, we're going to talk about that today, ovary, they're really misnomers. And so I think it'll be exciting to get into that.
Did men put their names in menopause? It sounds like it.
They're like, how can I be a part of this?
Well, the ovary does so much, and when it stops functioning, the menses, our periods end. So I think it's kind of hilarious that we mark the end of the function of this critical and vital organ by men just don't see that we have our periods anymore. And so we'll dive into some of that, but really underlying a lot of this is not just the words we use and not really describing things correctly and accurately, but there's a huge disparity in funding for research and innovation in the space. I've been toiling away for about 14 years as an entrepreneur in the space, and less than 2% of funding not only goes to female founders, But less than 2% of all biopharma funding goes into innovation in women's health, which is in stark contrast to the fact that we use the majority of pharmaceuticals on Earth. And yet all those profits don't create a virtuous cycle back into better products for us. So we'll talk about that.
So let's get a little deeper, like ovaries impact brain health, metabolism, cardiovascular. I want you both to weigh in. Do you want to start, Dr. Beim?
Sure. So again, it's not just an egg factory. We really see it as central command. The ovary is important for metabolic function, for immune function, for brain health. And when you have ovarian dysfunction early in life with conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, which impacts about 15% of all women, or early menopause, conditions like that, it's not just a reproductive condition. Sam brought this up in an earlier panel, and I love that. We have to stop referring to these as our reproductive organs. We have to stop referring to these as reproductive conditions because they do so much more. And we see that women with PCOS, for example, have significant risk factors for cardiovascular disease, mental health issues, insulin resistance, diabetes, obesity, hirsutism. So this is more than just about reproduction, and that's important for women to understand.
Dr. Shepard, you want to add to that?
Yeah, to go along the lines of it's not just a reproductive organ, and even, as an MD and trained for God knows how many years. I don't want to think about it. But anyway, it was like traumatic. I got some bad memories there. But really, when we look at the metabolic portion, and that's really what I focus my practice on, is changing the landscape of what we think of. It's just the home of the egg. And that's what we are seeing specifically in menopausal health and the science behind it, because we are really getting much more sophisticated with it now. We have a long way to go. But you do see those features in menopause and PCOS, endometriosis, in where you may have changes in either too much estrogen that's being released that can shift other things in the body. And that's why it's so important to take away it's just an ovarian issue, but really it's the catalyst for so many other metabolic issues that can then funnel into cardiovascular issues, pre-diabetes, brain health, bone health. And so that's why I think it's such a function of the entire body, but it really has so much power. And so I feel we need to maybe do like a campaign for let's rename or let's do a refocus on the ovaries and what they do. And the more people that understand that, then the more they can see the longevity that it brings to their entire health, in addition to reproductive health.
So how many people here knew that the ovaries can affect your cardiovascular, your bone health, metabolism? Just raise your hand, be honest. Not that many, right? So why do you guys think we have been sort of left out of the conversation and the narrative has been that it is just to produce eggs?
Oh, I think patriarchy,
Yeah.
right? So reproduction, that's what we're good for, right? And that's what our purpose is. And menopause, when that's over, we're kind of like, oh, well, thank you so much for your service of reproduction. You now can go sit in a corner with your hot flashes as well, right?
Dr. Beim, what do you think of that?
I agree. I mean, if you think about terms like hysteria,
right.
We've relegated these to the dustbin of the patriarchy, and I really think for my daughter, she's 5, she's turning 6 on Monday, I want her to look back in horror that we called this organ failure. I mean, it's really a catastrophic public health crisis and life event. And we called it menopause, and we had these cute little names for our parts, and we considered them just reproductive. I'm hoping her generation finds that horrific.
So I want to get in, yes, the end of menopause? Are you calling for the end of menopause?
I'm calling for the end of menopause. You guys know more.
Let's hear some cheers for that.
Okay. The end of calling it menopause, but also one of the things that I've been pioneering with my team at Celmatix is a drug to help extend ovarian function. So if you think about it, I reflect on even before my children had teeth, I was being told, wipe their gums because their teeth are going to come in. Even before they had that, I was already protecting its longevity. Whereas the ovary, we just watch it stop functioning and we call it a phase of life. But in reality, 100 years ago, menopause was not a thing, you guys. The average life expectancy for a woman in the US was 48. And the ovary functions on average until about 50 to 55. Now, fast forward, just 100 years later, average life expectancy for us in this room in the US is 82. So we're not just outliving the function of this critical organ, we're outliving it for decades. But what we know is that even though women are living longer, we're not always thriving. And what we don't realize is that one of the most powerful accelerants for unhealthy aging, I'm pro-aging, I love aging.
Yes.
I don't like unhealthy aging. And so one of the most powerful accelerants for unhealthy aging is that this organ stops working. There's no other organ where we just simply let it die and consider it like natural. And when people say, well, isn't menopause natural? I remind them, well, dying in childbirth is natural. And yet we don't think that's okay. So we're working on a drug to help extend ovarian function and help it decline slowly the way that testicular function declines for men so that we can age like a fine wine as well.
But I think that was a great point, is we are living to older ages, so a significant portion of our life, like I call it, if you're thinking of quarters in it's quarters in basketball, right? Yeah. So clearly I don't watch sports. But that last quarter of our lives, like, why should we subject ourselves to downtrodden and feeling horrible? And we have this ability to thrive. And just like you were saying, I love aging, and I think that we all are going to age, we know this, but how can we take a hold of how we choose to age?
So, Dr. Shepard, I want to talk a little bit about hormones and how do the ovaries, how are they linked? How do they affect our overall health?
Yeah, our ovaries really have a significant amount of hormones that they release, namely estrogen and testosterone. I think testosterone is not often spoken when we think of women because it's a very manly hormone, but we do have a good amount of testosterone. It's our most potent hormone, but estrogen obviously functions and fuels a lot of the other organs in our body and bodily functions. And so what was the question again?
Well, my question is it safe to put extra hormones into your body?
Yes, the
she
hormone
was just like
replacement
doctor
therapy.
talking all of you, and we're like, yeah.
And then I was like, what were we talking about? But hormone replacement therapy, we are starting to get back into the Sam is dying over there. We're getting back into the frame of putting it in a safety context of what we can get from estrogen, because we know here's this organ that's dying and it's not giving off estrogen. So what can we recoup, and how can we restore some of those levels of hormone replacement therapy? Now, just to kind of give you context, back in the 1990s, there was a study that was done, the WHI. A lot of women were in this study and they were having some bad outcomes, so they put that to rest. They put that study to rest. But what came from it is that it kind of went out in the media of, oh my gosh, hormone replacement therapy is horrible, and that's what stuck. Unbeknownst to probably the general population, is they did do retroactive looking at the study and what were the things that made the study not so great at the time. And what we did find is it was in the population that they studied, it wasn't the best population that they studied, but hormone replacement therapy for sure was showing great outcomes on longevity, how we live, how we thrive, and fueling the other parts of our body. So now we're getting back to that stage where we're able to talk about hormone replacement therapy and what it can do for you. It just needs to be a very guided conversation because we're still stuck in it's not good. And so we need to change that narrative and improve our conversation behind it.
So they tried it once and then they just gave up.
Yeah, they were like, all right, so women again, yeah, we're not going to go
Yeah.
back there.
So,
Can I interject about HRT?
yeah.
I think, so I'm glad you brought it up. One of the stats that I've heard is, and this applies to my mom's generation, the women who were impacted by that poorly conducted and analyzed study, on average, lost about 10 years of lifespan because of misinformation about HRT, and it's just a crime. And we don't want this generation of women to not get to benefit from it. It's a really important intervention around the perimenopause transition, and every woman should aggressively advocate for herself and find a new OBGYN if she's not as enlightened as Dr. Shepard. But what I wanted to say is, while HRT is a powerful tool, it's also a very crude tool. So the ovary, it's like a symphony, if you think about the music. It responds to your immune system. If you have a fever, it changes. If you're tired, it changes. It responds to your diet. And HRT is like a foghorn. It's just like, roar, you know? So it's not dynamic. You're just adding this thing back. And so this is why we celebrate that we have this tool, but we're really technologically trying to say it's not enough, though. HRT is the tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. Not only is the ovary a very dynamic organ, it also produces a lot more than just estrogen, progesterone, testosterone's one thing. I could bore you guys with the biology, but there's so much that we miss even when we add just HRT back.
So that leads very nicely into the next kind of thing I want to talk about. Why hasn't there been more research and innovation around the ovaries? And drop that fact you dropped to me. Like, you know, initially, rather than researching women in the medical community, they used to research smaller men, from what I understand. I learned that fact.
No, so...
Well, and then I'm going to let Dr. Beim is going to drop an even better fact. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I think...
I'm not a doctor, I know.
So I know what you're referencing. So it turns out we're not just tiny men, you guys, but that's what the pharma industry...
Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
This is a fact of the day.
If you take nothing away, take that away today.
In all seriousness, there was a Nature paper that just came out a few weeks ago saying women are not scaled down males. That was actually like a groundbreaking paper.
In 2023.
That was published in
2023.
2023. So it turns out, I know it's shocking to the people in this room, that we have different organs. And we also have different chromosomes in every single one of our cells. So for pound, we are more genetically similar to a female member of a different species, like a gorilla, than males.
This is all making sense.
Right?
In so many ways.
Right? And so what we haven't been doing is starting from a place of, here's a unique creature that has unique body parts and unique genes in her body. And let's figure out what makes that biology unique and then design products for that body. Instead, what we've been doing is taking either a generic human, which we know means a male, and then we scale it down for females. And that means that women are less likely to respond to drugs, they're more likely to have an adverse effect, and they're more likely to experience withdrawal symptoms. And also, it's awful news for the biopharma industry because one of the most common reasons that new drugs that are in development fail is that they finally, at the finish line, put them in females and they have horrible reactions. Remember the J&J vaccine, you guys? They had to take it off the market. Those were all humans with functioning ovaries that had those adverse effects. Every single person that had a scary adverse effect was a human with an ovary that was functioning.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
That was a lot. Okay, so she's going to do a mic drop, but I hope she doesn't drop her mic because she has a lav on. What do you think about menopause, Dr. Beim? Go for it. Go off.
We have to end it. We have to end it. Menopause, again, for men, their testicular function declines linearly. Their bodies can adjust to it over time. We really fall off a cliff. If you look at the curve, it's an accelerated decline, and it's vastly worse for women undergoing chemotherapy. So every month that you're on chemotherapy, you lose 1.5 years of your ovarian function. And so we treat it, again, as a reproductive problem. We try to get women into egg freezing, et cetera. But what about them? So the consequence for women who survive their cancer treatment is then they have a 300% increased risk of developing multimorbidity by the age of 70. That means they have dementia and heart disease. Mm-hmm. They have an autoimmune disorder and diabetes. And so for us, we're really passionate, especially for that ultra-vulnerable community, to get this medication that we're developing in their hands so that we can end menopause. But I'm unapologetic about this, that I think it's not something that's just a natural life phase that we should all just embrace and relax around. I think it's something that we absolutely have to raise the alarm. It is not an inevitability of being a female. It is a public health crisis.
Okay, we're going to get into what science can do to help us end menopause and increase our ovarian health. But Dr. Shepard, do you have anything to add? You see a lot of patients.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about menopause?
I feel, when it comes to menopause and abortion, I'm the yeller, loudest advocate for women to get the care that they need, but truly understand how phenomenal they are. I like to build it from, you are phenomenal, and now let's go discuss why you're so phenomenal from a medical standpoint. And there's so much education that I have to do when they come into my exam room, because think about it, for so long someone's been told this one thing. And then for me to just say, oh, well, I believe that we can really change the trajectory of your life, going forward after this time frame or this transition that you're going through. And also in perimenopause, that's also another feature that we don't discuss as much. And in your 40s is when you're starting this kind of rapid decline, is you're starting to feel all these symptoms. And so many women who come into my office feel unheard, in the sense that they know something's going on, they can't quite put their finger on it, but when they do go talk to their provider, it usually is, well, your labs are normal, so the end result is you just need to figure it out, or, you know, just kind of grin and bear through, or what is it? Grin and bear. Yeah, that one.
Bear it.
So I feel we have to change that first, because when we have a collective understanding of truly what we're able to get as a result, if we're able to drive the conversation better, then that's when we're going to see some action. And so I feel the perimenopausal phase is usually where I like to focus on for women, because I'm like, you haven't quite gotten there yet, and there's so much work we can do on the front end of it, and education, knowledge, and awareness of what's coming, and also changing the narrative of what happens after menopause. And you are no less of a woman, and you doesn't mean that you can't do all the things that you ascribe to do, or you can't get the goals that you want, because I think that's what we've been told for so long. And so that's where I like to put the frame of mind, instead of focusing so much on the clinical aspect of it, is the emotional and the individual feeling that women have.
I love that. This is going to be awkward, but you call ovaries cute. You tell women they're phenomenal. Will you be my OBGYN?
Yeah,
Is it
just
awkward?
I mean, we've already discussed this. I am now trying to be her OBGYN for how many years now?
Years.
Yeah,
But
so
today's the day she convinced
we're locking
me.
it in.
But I love reframing it as not a rapid decline, because men are told that, oh, you're rapidly declining, and they are. So, Dr. Beim, let's get into like, what can science do? Help us, because this is very overwhelming. I didn't do the pun again. You're welcome.
So, as I mentioned, estrogen and progesterone, testosterone, they're the tip of the iceberg in what the ovary produces. There's another hormone that's called anti-Mullerian hormone, AMH. You probably have heard of it in the context of fertility testing. So it turns out that the reason that it's such a powerful test is because AMH is the key molecular brake in the decline in ovarian function. And so you're born kind of with a jar of jelly beans, let's say, and each one of those jelly beans is a potential ovarian follicle, which is an egg and the endocrine metabolic cells that wrap around the egg. And you pull a certain number of jelly beans out of the jar every day, and when the jar is depleted, your ovary basically is shriveled up and doesn't work anymore. And so AMH is the brakes on that. And so as we get older and we have fewer jelly beans coming out, our AMH levels go down, and that's what causes the acceleration. So if we can catch women before they go into that accelerated phase and add AMH back, what we believe and what we know from having done this in animals, and it works in animals, is that we can have that curve be smoother, and we can, again, have the function decline more slowly, so we don't kind of waste our follicles when we don't need them. And when you do the modeling, we think we can actually push the age of menopause out closer to 70, 80 for women instead of 50. That would have implications for their ability to get pregnant and to be healthy. But the other thing I wanted to add is that this is like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's extremely expensive. It's an uphill battle for me to fundraise for this work. And so it'll be a while. But what can you do right now? What you can do right now is start to recognize that the things that don't feel right in your body are not just aging, you know. So when your ovary stops working, you become more prone to inflammation. So this is where really focusing on, you know, like diet's a big one, stress is a big one. I know it's easy to say, like, just eat healthy and be less stressed out, but it is so vital. The other thing is glucose metabolism is severely disrupted. So I'm wearing a glucose monitor, for example, not because I'm diabetic, but because I found that monitoring my glucose levels as my ovary, I'm in perimenopause, stops working well, helps me avoid night wake-ups, hot flashes, that inflammation. There are certain supplements as well that are really powerful. If anybody wants to reach out to me, at least about the regimen that I have figured out works for my body, you have to personalize this stuff. Piraye Beim at Gmail, go for it. You can reach out to me and I'm happy to give you advice.
That's amazing. I think we all want your regime here.
Yeah, okay. I'll share
So
it.
I have a question. If we're going to be working on extending the lives of ovaries, does that mean that we'll outlive the patriarchy? Is this what we're heading to?
We are.
We
We are
We
going
already
to.
are, but we're really going to.
But what's important is it's not about outliving. Women currently outlive men by a couple of years, but we're also we are the inhabitants of care homes. So women are the kind of, the majority of care home inhabitants are female. And I know this would be surprising. Do you know the number one reason why women end up in a care home? Urinary incontinence. So one of the things that, when you think about pelvic health, the importance of sex in maintaining pelvic health, it's really, really important, because if you can't control your urine anymore, it vastly increases the likelihood that you're going to end up in a home. So these are the kinds of things, when our ovary functions for longer, we'll have more elasticity. The natural pelvic health that we enjoy earlier in life will go further out, and it'll have huge knock-on effects for our economy. We'll be more productive. So it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.
I really heard from all of that you just said, that have more sex. Did you guys catch that?
That's
Yeah.
what I was just gonna say. Thank you for pointing
That's what I
at me when
heard.
you're like the importance of sex.
Yeah.
My mom would be so proud.
And then after that, I was like, wah, wah, wah. And I was like, she just said have more sex.
So actually, I do want to get into that. Like, how does extending the life of our ovaries better women's lives? Give us the rundown, Jess.
Yeah, we named all the hormones, well, the three main ones that we usually discuss with ovaries, which is your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. But that loss of testosterone that we also have through the perimenopausal, menopausal phase impacts some of our libido. But in addition to that, and I really want to clarify that, it's not just like you lose your testosterone, you don't want to have sex. There is such a neural component to that of how we look at intimacy, how we look at our partners, how we feel about ourselves. And in that comes the emotional baggage of, again, what women are told once they're finished with menopause, or if they do have vaginal dryness or urinary incontinence. These are the things that start to occur as you start to have that decline in estrogen. But again, we have to change the narrative of what happens and what's the conversation when those things start to happen. And many women who come into my office feel less than because these things start to happen. So there's no one to empower them or even give them the resources to say, these are things that we can help you with. It's just kind of the unspoken thing that happens, and when then they do happen, it's kind of like you don't talk about it. So they suffer in silence, then that plays an impact on how we behaviorally adjust to these things that are occurring in our life, and that's what you start to see both from a hormonal perspective, but also from an emotional and physical perspective, because your body is just starting to do things that didn't happen before, so collectively.
Yeah, can I throw out one more that I forgot? Alcohol. So unfortunately...
No, we're not. The panel's over, and we are... I already know where she's going with this, but it is true.
So now when I drink, which is rare because my ovary doesn't work as well anymore, I can't process alcohol as well. So estrogen is really important for processing alcohol. And so if you feel like, wow, I used to have so many drinks when I was younger, bounce right back, now I have a glass of wine, I feel horrible, there's actually a physiological basis to that. And this is why wearing a glucose monitor, monitoring your diet, your exercise, your stress level, if you can get your body in better balance, you can afford to have a glass of wine every now and then. But I think what I've been really excited to see are some of the alcohol alternatives that are coming out. Mm-hmm. And I think especially for women who are postmenopausal or going through the menopause transition, it's important to listen to those signals from your body if you can't handle it, and really manage, again, my glucose monitors made it much easier for me to have an occasional drink every now and then, because my body doesn't bounce back if I'm not super proactive about what else I'm doing with my body around the times that I drink.
So we have wine on tap and we have estrogen on tap. Yeah. So, to wrap, because there's a lot of information we all just got, and it is overwhelming, but give us one piece of advice. Dr. Beim, what would you like to leave the audience with? You've already left so much good stuff, but give us one more nugget.
Sleep more. The other thing that's really important, we think of melatonin as a central nervous system, kind of the sleep hormone. It turns out our ovaries are covered in melatonin receptors. And it can really, really impact your ovarian health if you don't sleep enough. And the other thing is, if you can, wear blue light blockers. When you're in front of a screen all day, get out in the morning, get some morning sun. Try to get a 10-minute walk in the afternoon, get the afternoon sun. Think about your melatonin signaling as well in the context of your ovarian health.
Awesome. Dr. Shepard, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, and this is something that I live and breathe and also like to express to anyone that I'm speaking to, such as today, my patients, is it's really a transition, not so much, again, of the hormone, but our lifestyle. And that's what I exactly tell my patients is, how can we transition into a difference in lifestyle that can serve us better so we can show up better? And that goes with sleep. I'm still working on that one, but I have gotten better sleep. But shifting how we think about alcohol doesn't mean you can't drink, but how can I shift that work? Yes, you knew I was going to say that. but just figuring it out what works for you. And then also the metabolic changes that happen, including inflammation during this transition, is so very important and allows you to, again, live that life in a way that you feel more vibrant, but we have to stay attuned to it. So having conversations with people who truly understand the functionality and metabolically of what happens during perimenopause and menopause is only going to give you so much more power and utility to having a quality of life. It really is, what is that quality of life? You don't want to be 60, 70, 80 and really having a not so great life. You still want to be having sex and drinking maybe once a week, Sam. We'll do once a week. So really take in, I would say, breathe in, how can I get through this transition and leave a wonderful quality of life and a legacy that is for me, and that's individual work, but find the people who can support that.
Yeah. All right, guys, your ovaries are cute.
They
Have
are.
more sex. You can drink a little. And join us later for our hit film, My Left Ovary, in a World. All right, guys, give it up. One big ovary applause for these